Hi, my name is Massa. Last year I reviewed the video quality coming out of the NES Classic. Well, now this year the SNES Classic came out, so I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna test the emulation out of this thing versus the Wii U's emulation versus my SNES with RGB output to the Framemeister. And if you want any more context to this, you can watch my previous video on the NES Classic, and it's gonna be up here somewhere. Now, the Super Nintendo was basically the cornerstone of my childhood. I remember going over a friend's house and seeing him play Star Fox and Super Mario World, and I only had an NES at the time, and I was like, I have to have this. I received some money for my first communion, and I went out to a used game place and I bought a used console, pretty much against my parents' wishes. They wanted me to save my money like idiots. I got riding me some Yoshi, parents. Later I got Zelda Link to the Past and Super Metroid, and the following year Chrono Trigger came out, and that's basically my favorite game of all time. The Super Nintendo showed me the true potential of games as a storytelling media, and it had enough graphics to have personality and artistic style. So it was pretty important for me to snag one of these SNES classics. And I actually ran to the nearest GameStop to get a pre-order. Once they announced it on Twitter, I just ran over there, and brother, I got one. I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem. And yes, I know Raspberry Pis can emulate all these games. I can put 600 games on it. Shut up. I don't care about you. I want the real thing, the real fake thing. So just like the NES Classics box, I love the retro design and the fonts. You see that it comes with 2 controllers, which is much appreciated. You got that Classics logo on top, and a beautiful smattering of game box arts. And of course, the never-been-released Star Fox 2, which is sort of exciting. But personally, I revisited Star Fox somewhat recently, and I just don't think the 3D FX chip stuff holds up very well. It's like 10 frames per second, so Star Fox 2 doesn't really appeal to me. But I'm in it for Zelda, Metroid, Mario, and all those delicious, delicious classic RPGs. Opening it up and now you're playing it with power. Play it loud, my friends, play it loud. So we have the little console here, and I know some people prefer the European and Japanese design, but I'm all for boxy gray and purple. It's perfectly recreated, except that the eject button doesn't push and you can't stick tiny carts in the top. I want to stick tiny carts in the top. Should have came with a couple tiny carts. The front snaps open, revealing the controller ports, which are the same on the NES Classic and the Wii Remote. Also, same exact connectors in the back for USB power and HDMI, as was the case with the NES Classic. And those cables are, of course, included. Like the NES Classic, it comes with a nostalgia poster, and the controller is a perfect replica of the old controllers. The only difference is my childhood controller has been given a glossy sheen by my tiny, disgusting hands. The new controller is still crisp and matte. The cord length has been improved from the NES Classic. It's about 4 feet 7 inches, but still not as long as the old school cord, which is about 3 feet longer. But if you need some extra length, there are extension cords like this one, and they're pretty plentiful on Amazon. It's important to note that the SNES Classic's controller works perfectly with the NES Classic, so it can double as an extra controller for that system. Size-wise, I don't have my original Super Nintendo with me. It's in storage, so I'll have to compare the size to the NES Classic. They're both small, meaningless comparison. But they sure do look cute together. You stack them up and they look cute, it's cute. I like it when you turn it on and the mini LED comes on. And just like the NES Classic, you will need to use the reset button to access the menu. The interface is pretty similar to the NES Classic. You can select a language, choose a display option like Pixel Perfect, CRT filter, and of course 4:3 mode, which is my preferred mode. It's got some optional borders, makes me think of Super Game Boy borders. You got 4 save state slots per game, just like the NES Classic, and after beating the first level of Star Fox, you unlock Star Fox 2, so that's neat. I think the game lineup is exceedingly strong. Maybe I would have swapped out this version of Street Fighter 2 for Super Street Fighter 2. Maybe it would have benefited from a sports game like NBA Jam. Chrono Trigger is painfully absent, especially since it's my favorite game on the system. But you can't beat Super Metroid, A Link to the Past, Contra 3, and Earthbound? I mean, that's unreal. How amazing is it to have so many timeless classic games on this thing? And sometimes I like to play Super Ghouls and Ghosts because I f***ing hate myself. There's not a dud on here. There's no equivalent to Ice Climbers, for instance. Hey, don't give me that face. You know what you are. So the Wii U actually had some great Super Nintendo emulation, unlike its NES emulation, which was fuzzy and dull. Like your mom.
Fuzzy and dull.
I'm not sorry. I won't apologize. I'm gonna see how the SNES Classics emulation stacks up to the Wii U's emulation. And while I'm at it, I have my SNES 2 outputting RGB to the Framemeister, which upscales the original system to 1080p, so I can compare that as well. Looking at Super Mario World, I'd say the Wii U emulation is a tad less crisp than the SNES Classic and the Framemeister, which are both super sharp. The SNES through the Framemeister has slightly darker colors, and the Wii U and SNES Classic are about the same color-wise. Vibrant and bright. I'd say the Wii U version's like 95% there. All in all, I'd say there's a negligible difference between the Framemeister, Wii U, and SNES Classic in terms of video quality. Unlike the NES Classic, which had some very acute differences. So it's not a bad deal to get a ton of the best SNES games with pretty much the best quality, and you can even fuck it up with a CRT filter if you want. One question I had is that the FX chip games, Yoshi's Island and Star Fox, have never come to Virtual Console before, and I was wondering if there was some problem emulating the FX chip, and they are included on the SNES Classic, so I was surprised to see that. Let's see how they hold up to the actual carts. As far as I can tell, Star Fox looks just about as good as it did on the SNES. If there's a change, I don't notice it. Yoshi's Island also seems about the same, things scale and warp properly. But what happens when you touch Fuzzy and get dizzy? What happens when you do that? It's interesting. In the SNES Classic Edition, the screen flashes, and then the trippy effects happen as usual. And on the actual cart, a little blur effect happens. So maybe the emulation in the SNES Classic couldn't do this blur effect? Literally unplayable. Other than that, I personally didn't see any huge graphical differences. I'm sure there are others, I just didn't notice them. But gameplay-wise, these FX chip games played just like they used to. So there you have it. The SNES Classic is great. A great game lineup. Great graphical fidelity. And Star Fox 2 is there, if you want it. I don't care, but it's there. There's slightly longer controller cords and enough nostalgia to last you a lifetime. You'll show your kids and you'll be like, "Kids, look, this is a tiny replica of a thing I used to like. Kids, where are you going? Let me talk about the things I like and replicas of things that I like." Aw, at least I have you, SNES Classic. At least I have you. And hopefully Nintendo does a better job at supplying these things, unlike last time. I'm hearing hopeful early reports that the stock is a little bit better, but I'm not holding my breath. Anyways, I hope you found this interesting, and I'll see you next time. Bye.